Good evening, everyone. We are on page 45, and we are in the middle of our discussion about what happens when you change your location, which we kind of did most of really last week, and what it means to eat while traveling, which Al Maiman told us sounds much better in Ladino. Let me just double check what that word was, but it's a great phrase. But it's truly fantastic. I'll tell you, it's Caminando y comiendo. It sounds much better.
Yeah, it's
Caminando y
nice.
comiendo, like it just classic. So we're going to talk about eating while traveling. But before we do that, I just want to close off the loop of what we learned last week and a little bit of an introduction, which surprisingly this book does not include. So first of all, eating while when not eating while traveling. What happens when you change your location? Bottom line, you shouldn't change your location when you're eating, which is, and that's going to be a preface into this session, which is really you should begin your meal, have your meal, finish your meal. Now things happen, life happens, and what happens with that? And our conclusion was if it is a meal with other people and they are going to be staying in that table in that meal, you can get up, do what you need to do, and come back to it, and that is enough for the fact that people are there, that there's no issue. Now, a couple of practical ramifications of that is, for example, in the sukkah, some people say it's nice that somebody stays in the sukkah at all times. It's not just nice. From this concept, it's a halachic requirement that there is somebody in the sukkah at all times because
During the
of
meal.
yes, because of the concept of shinui makom, of changing location. The second thing I want to share is a couple of you asked during the class, and a few will ask after the class, what is this thing about I'm planning on eating at multiple sukkot in an afternoon, what's called a sukkah hop, or in English, a sukkah crawl. Can I go and do that? Start with one and continue at multiple sukkot. Ideally, from what we've seen, you should be doing an after bracha at the end of each sukkah, and continuing. Each sukkah should be its unit, especially if what you're eating there is going to be mezonot or hamotzi. What we're going to roll into is our discussion is what we're saying here regarding to foods which are real meal foods, okay? Things which you just sit down and eat, which is, a bread meal, a pasta meal, something heavy that you don't want to be moving around and coming back to. You want to be staying in that zone. What tonight's class is really about is, but there are foods which we eat on the go. We are snackers, and if it's really snack food, does what I've said apply or not? Now, the Gemara looks down upon those who eat on the fly. But as I said, I think the reason why the Talmud looks down upon it, because it's almost like you're going to create an unhealthy situation. You're going to create something which is not good for you, where you are going to choke on what you're eating, you're going to be rushing, you're not going to digest properly. But again, all that, I think, the reason why it's not brought in our section is because that's what it's talking about. It's referring to heavy foods. But what we're going to look at tonight is what happens if I'm eating snack foods. What also is going to be discussed here is I have no other choice. For example, I'm on a plane, I'm on a train, I'm even on a car. Now, a car is different because I think like that's kind of like drinking in the car, or even using your phone on the car. That they're a little distracting to be able to eat in the car. So maybe that, especially if you're the driver, it's probably best to what's it called, to pull over, so and stop in the rest
I don't think
area.
it's just a matter of
Yeah.
health. I think there's a spiritual dimension to this. That you're not, in other words, when you eat, you should be mindful of eating. And if you're doing other things, then you're not really thinking about what you're that.
I think absolutely right. That where is the mindfulness? Where is the attention to the matter at hand? But there are halachot for when you must pray and move. For example, you're on a camel,
Right.
and or you're on a caravan, and the caravans are moving through the desert. The camels are moving through the desert. You can't stop. You're on a plane. You've got to pray. If you don't pray, then you're going to miss the window. There are times where you are moving. No matter what, you're on a cruise. There are certain scenarios where even if you're very comfortable and you feel like you're sitting, you're actually moving location. Where are the halachot here? So I want us to look at, there are scenarios where I have no choice, but we also have this issue of I have a choice, but maybe it's a snack rather than an actual meal. So I think just to hold on to that concept here, that I'm not recommending having a meal where we are having a fixed meal, again, for the mindfulness, and also just I just don't think it's a good option.
I'm just thinking, if you're on a ship, if you've ever gone on a cruise, you're not really aware that you're moving.
Right.
So you're standing in one place. Even on an airplane, you're sitting in one place. So somehow that seems to be like it's different than
but I'm saying, but it's still
It's the worst. Like you have to eat because it's a bazillion-hour flight and you're hungry.
right.
But I hate eating on the airplane. It's like a little tray of containers and opening in there. And,
Some
I
are
agree.
tasty.
they are tasty.
Some airlines, they're kosher food. They have smoked salmon. They have a whole baguette. Anyways, I'll leave that for later.
Cormac, I love you. But anyone tells me they're a foodie and they like airplane food, I'm sorry.
But I do.
2 thumbs down.
I do have a question though, because nothing is in relative still, like standing still in one place. Even as we're sitting here in this makom, we're still moving in relative to something else.
Well, the Earth is.
Oh, the Earth is rotating.
Yeah.
So So again, that's a good point. With the Earth is rotating, I mean, relative to the ship moving or the plane or whatever, do I feel it? What's happening there? Anyway, I just want to have those edges in our minds as we see these halachot, because again, I don't want anyone thinking, oh, you know what, this seems to be lechatchila. Ideally, I should be traveling and eating. I really don't think that's the case. This is more dealing with A, snacking, which is very common, and B, I have to. And what is the way to do that? So it says as follows, page 45. Let's see the introduction. When people are traveling or walking outside, they sometimes eat food while in transit. In light of what we have learned in the previous sections, should eating while walking or in transit create any halachic difficulties with respect to reciting berachot? Would one be required to recite a beracha rishona multiple times as one moves locations? Does it matter what type of food one is eating? The Bet Yosef writes in the name of the Samak. The Samak is a Rishon, it's a great name. The Sefer Mitzvot Ketanot, an Ashkenazic Rishon, that people traveling eat while they are in transit and then recite the beracha wherever they finish eating. Now, again, the Samak is dealing with a scenario where one has to. It's not dealing with here a voluntary option. But the Beit Yosef quotes, "Ukamoshe nahagu holchei derachim," and that which those who travel are accustomed, she'ochlim derech hilucham, that they eat on the way along their journey, v'yoshvim, and they sit down, umevarachim b'makom siyum achilatan, and they do the after bracha, in this case, Birkat Hamazon, where they finish eating. That seems to be the scenario. So that could be the scenario if you are on a plane, on a camel, on a horse, on whatever. And again, imagine not a horse. Horse is going too fast. But imagining a scenario where you are considered that final resting spots is where you are going to do Birkat Hamazon. Okay, it seems that according to the Samak, travelers are permitted to begin eating and continue until they finish, at which time they recite Birkat Hamazon. Now, why is this the case? Because you can't go back to where you were. If I'm traveling, I can't go back. So that's what I'm saying. If it's a normal situation, what's the halacha? You need to go back home and say Birkat Hamazon. Well, if you're traveling, you can't go back. Okay, you know what? Hold. We need to take a half an hour break for lunch and do all those things. Those, they're not always available to us. So Shulchan Aruch codifies in source 40, Im achal pat b'makom echad, if one ate bread in one place, v'chazar v'achal b'makom acher, and he went back and he ate in another place, אינו מברך בקד המזון, אלא במקום השני. He only makes בקד המזון in the second spot. כמו שנהגו הולכי דרכים, שאוכלים דרך הילוכם ויושבים ומברכים במקום סיום אכילתם. So here the Shulchan Aruch is codifying that. I start in one place, I finish in a second place. Where do I do Birkat Hamazon? In the second place. It's not saying I need to go back to where I began. And that's what I'm saying. All of this seems to be establishing a situation where he's not able to do so because he's really traveling. It's not, I'm in one house and I'm going to Shoshana's house and I can't be bothered to walk the 5 minutes home. It's, you've got to, there, I would say you have to go back and finish. But here, it's there's a really traveling. The Mishnah Berurah explains that as we learned previously, the Shulchan Aruch holds that one should not leave in the middle of a meal with bread and would need to recite a new bracha rishonah if he does so. Furthermore, even the Ramah holds that ideally one should not leave in the middle. Nevertheless, travelers, and this is the difference here, are permitted to eat a meal with bread in transits if they had intent to do so initially, which is, that's what's going to happen. I have to do this. There's no other way of doing it. So, Holechei Derachim, says the Mishnah Berurah, Dehem lekule alma mutar lahem lehaloch ulechol. For them, and I'm going to say in parentheses, only, are allowed to walk and to eat, or to go and eat. Af im ein ro'in mekoman harishon, machamat merachek haderech. Now for them, even if they can no longer see the first spot where they began to eat because it's so far away, or shemafsikin ilanot, or because the trees are blocking them in between them, mishum dehem lo kavu atzman lechatchila lecho b'makom shebaruchu. And why is that? Because when they began to eat, they never established that space, that spot, that place, as where they were going to eat. They knew as soon as they started that they were going to continue to walk and to eat. Therefore, and therefore they don't have a special law regarding uprooting their place because they never had it in mind. But if they had intended to stay there and have their meal, and then they changed their mind to conclude their Seudah while he was walking, as he sees his original place, it is permitted for him to eat because it is considered one place. Okay, so he keeps going into perhaps I'm going to change my mind as I'm doing it. And then he writes, continue to the next paragraph down. However, if he thought to eat a bit of food in one place and the rest on the journey, that works. And this is so even if the trees block his view, because it is only from one house to another that his intent to eat fruit does not help. But if he began eating in a house and then went out on the road, it is like going from one house to another. Thus his intent for the fruits does not help, and he must recite another bracha. But for bread, his intent does help, even lechatchila. So he wants to go again. We're going to go back into the whole discussion about whether it's fruits or whether it's bread or mezonot and what is he eating here. But basically, what the Mishnah Berurah wants to say is it's all about, when it comes to shinui makom, changing your place, it's all about intent. What was your kavanah? What was your intent when you started the meal? Did you know you were traveling? If you knew you were traveling, then there was no kaviyat makom, there was no fixed place, and therefore I can continue to go, and I'm not forced to return. And I don't need to make new barachot as I'm continuing.
It seems to me, though, that this is, he's describing something different here. Walking and eating, which like in New York, you see people all the time walking along and eating on the, as they go from place to place, is different than being in a plane where you are not, I don't know how to describe the difference. The plane is moving, just like the earth is moving, but you're not moving. In other words, I'm establishing, this is my makom achilah. Seems to me that would be different, a different kind of description. The issue seems to be relate more to the person who's walking along and he's finishing his lunch as he's doing.
I mean, again, he's not even getting into those scenarios. I mean, it seems from the sources being brought here, I'm only allowing this because you're in transit, like literally traveling. Now, what would be okay? not your lunch and you want to walk through Central Park in New York, or you want to walk the Loop. That would not be allowed. This is, I'm on my way home, I'm traveling to an appointment and I need to eat on that journey. Now, and that journey could be a car journey, it could be a bus journey, it could be whatever, it could be public transport. It could be I'm traveling across country, I'm traveling to Israel, whatever it might be, and those are the options where it's permitted. What it doesn't seem to be permitting right now is eating and just for fun. I'm enjoying that snack, which goes more to your point of intentionality, which is I shouldn't really do that. I mean, again, would this be saying that I might need to be making new barachot constantly if I was walking, if I was doing it for fun? It seems again, it doesn't want to address this position. It really doesn't want to get there. Like it seems to be, this is not something that I want to do. So the last source here, the halacha berura, is going to get to where Rubisa wants to get to, which is, what about I like eating candies, I like eating nuts while walking, and it's walking for fun. It is. I'm chewing that. I'm doing it.
I like you taking to a snack place because I'm still thinking about how much I like eating a falafel and strolling the streets of Yerushalayim.
Yes, I get
from
careful.
snack to
Careful.
Full on everything.
No.
I'm in.
No, so that's what I'm saying. I think if you're getting a shawarma in Yerushalayim, what we call, or any street food, it's really saying that's not what a Ben Adam does. It's not what it's not really. It's not really what a person is. It's saying you should like I'm saying, whether it's pizza, whatever, sit down, have it, take a few extra minutes. And again, it's not saying that people don't do it. It's not saying, oh, look at me, I have an air of superiority, I don't walk around while I'm eating my shawarma, I sit down. But it's saying here's what you should do. Okay, ladies, you're gonna be in Israel soon. When you go, take a few minutes. Enjoy that shawarma by sitting down. Don't rush it. Don't say, you know what, we've got to walk down King George, we've got to walk down Ben Yehuda Street. Enjoy it.
So the issue here is, for me, is that it's so easy to make a bracha and not really think about the words you're saying. He wants you to stop. In other words, when I say, whether it's misonot or motzi, say the bracha so it has meaning. If I'm walking and eating, you're not really thinking. You're not. In other words, there's just no intent, real kavanah.
I tell you, we were on Sunday. We went to we had lunch on the go, and we stopped off in a state park, nice state park, and you can stop there. And there was picnic benches, and there were toilets. You can wash your hands. You can sit nicely at a table, and then go. It's not one of those you have to. It sets a different mindset, which is, you're right, everything. We can think about the brachot that we're making. You can think about it rather than, I'm just, it changes a snack to a meal. It becomes more, and dare I say it, it's a formalizing of it, creates, a chashivut, an importance to it, where I'm going to think about what I'm eating. I'm not going to rush as much and say, okay, this is lunch. Doesn't matter if I'm in a park or I'm in my house. I'm going to take it seriously, and it doesn't matter if it's a bread meal or it's a mezonot meal or it's something else. I'm still going to sit down at a kitchen table, at a picnic table, and really enjoy. So the halacha berura now deals with this question about the snack sinners amongst us, and it says here,
That's still me.
Mikan yesh lilmod. From here there is to learn. Shehamehalech bederech, the one who is going along the way, rashai levarech veleechol toch kedei hilucha minei kitniot kegon garinim ubotnim. It is the one who's going along the way is permitted to make a bracha and eat different types of kitniot, legumes, or seeds, or peanuts. Garinim, your favorite.
Sunflower seeds. I've never
Yeah,
heard of such
I
you're
could
allowed
never-
to spit the seeds out.
I've
the
never
shells out.
heard about anyone doing this. It's must be people I don't know. Or latet betoch piv, or to put them in them. You may put these things in his mouth. Minei matika, sweets, kagon sukariot, candies, or little gum min hamashke, or you may drink liquids. but derech hilucho, while he's going. Again, you know, those people who carry those
Water bags?
water
Or
bags. I
different
don't
colors,
know
yeah,
who
like
they
that.
are. Again, I've never heard of any of these people. I'm not married to any of them. I don't have children like who do this at all. Hi, we're going on a hike. We need the world, all the snacks, all the drinks, all possible. All right, I'll have a drink at the end. Thank you very much. I don't know. Afopi she'over mibayit lebayit umi reshut lereshut. Even though you're moving from place to place or house to house, v'gam eino ro'eh et hamakom harishon shebeirach bo ala ma'achal. And even though he no longer sees where he began, ein bekach klum. Sharei lo kava makom le'achilato klal. Because for those types of foods, that wasn't the intent when they began to eat. So I want you to hear me well. My halachic opinion, with no humility whatsoever, is that if you're having drinks, if you're having snacks, okay, I'll be modeh. I will permit. I will allow. I will grant that is an okay thing to do. But to have a shawarma or have a falafel on the street, I don't think. I don't know whether that's. No, I don't know. From what we've seen, I don't think it's the best way to follow. Okay.
I will endeavor to not continue to do that.
Okay.
I appreciate
All
that.
right.
All right.
And,
Okay.
But
you know what?
breakfast
There's
in the
something
car-
to be said for sitting on the, on the midracho, and you sit there and you watch people passing by. That's another way of experiencing Israel. All right.
It is.
So-
Again, I'm not saying I've never done it before. I'm just saying once I learned these halachot and once I learned these gemarot, I genuinely try to be careful with this. It doesn't mean I've never done it and I haven't done it on occasion, but ideally that's the way. And part of that is probably my Yekish upbringing from my mother's side, which is that meal times are meal times and they should be done in a particular way. But there we go. All right, another shout out for my mother. All right, we're on. Yes,
Sorry.
Cormac, yeah, go for it.
What about some type of food that is kind of designed in the purpose for you to enjoy, especially when you're on the way?
Give me an example.
Like this does not exist right here, but let's say if there is a kosher place opening as a drive-through option, and you're on the road trip.
Okay, so
Yes,
if even though there are certain things which you might feel, this is an eat, like it's what are they all those called when you get pop-up restaurants and you can get these in Israel when we were there last summer and there were all these food trucks and things like that. No matter what, even with food trucks, there's tables, there's chairs. There's a way to do it, which is if you're having anything, which is a wrap, which could be anything from a mezonot to hamotzi, depending what's in it. Those types of things, we should be endeavoring to sit down and just take a moment. It doesn't take that long to eat. Maybe for me, because I'm a quick eater. But you can eat 5-10 minutes and then do your after bracha, depending what it is, whether it's bracha me'en shalosh or it's b'kal hamazon, and continue. Now, we're going to go back and discuss other types of interruptions on page 47, which could be something like, I forgot, there's ha'achot, and again, which are don't eat a meal close to the time of tepilah, which is in the morning, we're not allowed to eat until we said shachrit. Okay, like sometimes you might notice there's a fast time, and the fast starts at like 4:15, but it says, but you need to eat by 3:45. Now, where's that coming from? Which is there is a certain part of as soon as it's a certain amount close to the time of sunrise, I've already reached that time where I can start to say tefillah, so I shouldn't have a fixed meal. So same is true of mincha. I shouldn't eat at a time too late in the day, because if I eat too late in the day, what's going to happen? I'm going to be so preoccupied with my meal that I'm going to forget to say mincha. Arvit doesn't have this because I can say arvit really the whole time. Now, even that, they say best to do arvit as early as possible so you don't fall asleep and forget about it, especially if you have a heavy meal in the winter. You could just get stuck and never get up from the comatose of whatever you're having. But here, what I want to understand is that even though ideally one should not have a meal close to the end time of mincha, there are still times when you do it. So let's say I started late and I shouldn't have, ideally, but b'diavad it's still allowed, and I need to interrupt the meal in order to say mincha. What do I need to do? So that's what we're kind of going to discuss here. Hachi Amar Rav. So in the Gemara Masechet Chulin on 86b. Kevan Amar Hav Livrich. Once a person says, come, let us recite, Itzar le lemashte chamra. It's forbidden for him to drink any more wine. Hachanami, here also, Kevan de itpa le lechasue, ichayev le levracha. Here too, since he is required to cover, and it's an interesting thing here. What we're going to bring into this sugya here is saying, once I'm going to compare two contrasting situations. Once I've said it's time to do Birkat Hamazon, I can't drink anymore. Okay, which is stop eating. It's rude to say I'm going to continue eating or drinking once we've said it's time for Birkat Hamazon. At that moment, all bets are off. It says here too, since he is required to cover the blood once you have of the undomesticated animal before slaughtering the bird, there is an interruption between the acts of slaughter, and he has therefore become obligated to recite a new bracha before slaughtering the bird. So what's going on here is that what's considered a interruption which may require a new beracha, okay, which is I've been so disrupted by what's happened before, distracted by what happened before, I'm going to have to make a new blessing. So, for example, once I've said all bets are off, we've now got to do Birkat Hamazon. That means after Birkat Hamazon, I'm going to make a new bracha of Brei Pri HaGefen on that cup of wine. The same way I would say a new bracha on fruits or a new bracha on cake if those things came out after the meal. When we've talked about that scenario before, or seeds, Garinim always come back into that, which is what's being brought out after Birkat Hamazon. Are we going to continue eating, or not continue eating, but restart our eating? I had to make a bracha. So too, it says this interesting scenario, which we don't do anymore. I mean, we do it, but we don't do the slaughtering ourselves. We don't think about it, which is the blood has to be covered. So once I have to cover one animal, and then the other, I would have to make another bracha. So the Gemara says, "Hachichashta." How can these cases be compared? Hatam mishta uvaruche bahade hadade lo efsha. It's impossible to drink and recite a bracha simultaneously, which is you can't do a new cup of wine when you're making Birkat Hamazon. You've got to do Birkat Hamazon, and then you've got to start all over again. Aval hacha, but here. Why can't I slaughter one and cover the other? Slaughter one, cover the other. I don't need to say that I am distracted or disrupting. I can do this covering the blood. Shouldn't be considered an interruption. And so therefore, how can I compare the two? So this is the Gemara, and now we're going to try and understand how does that relate to us. Okay, according to this Gemara, the reason that one must recite a new beracha, Rishonah, after requesting a cup to recite Birkat Hamazon, is that one cannot eat at the same time as reciting Birkat Hamazon. Okay, you can't do that. That's a very important rule. Okay, sometimes people think you can. No. I'm still finishing. No, you got to get there. Therefore, the declaration to recite Birkat Hamazon demonstrates that one is about to engage in an interruption which concludes the meal. My act of Birkat Hamazon says, interruption, the meal is over. The Torah cites Rabbi Yom Tov, who suggests that likewise, reciting one of the daily tefillot, for example, mincha, in the middle of the meal, even at home, constitutes a hefsek because one cannot eat while he is praying. So can I say that? Okay, do I say that tefillah is something different? Does saying mincha in the middle of my meal, would that make me need to go back and restart the meal? So here, Katav Harav Yom Tov Bar Yehuda, Adam shenizkan b'toch ha'seudah shelo hitpalel. So that's how you know the person realized he forgot. I haven't said mincha yet. Can interrupt his meal va'amad v'hitpalel and say mincha. As you can see here, this is not ideal. It's just he realized he forgot. Ukeshehu chazer, and when he returns, tzarich litol yadav l'rek birkat hamotzi. He needs to make birkat hamotzi again, saying, you know what? This change, this getting up and saying mincha is like changing my place, is changing my intent, and I need to go back. So he says here, Ho'il utsaluye, since he prayed, umechal bahade hadade, because it's impossible to pray and eat at the same time. Mechal bahade hadade lo efshar, ki'ita beper kisui hadam. It's exactly like Mashtaya uvaruche bahade hadadi lo efshar. It's like the same situation of covering the blood. It's impossible to do those items of covering the blood and doing shechita. And since I can't do those two items together, me saying mincha, I can't say mincha and continue eating. I have to finish eating, say mincha, and then come back to it. So according to the Torah, quoting the Rav Yom Tov, I need to say Hamotzi again. But Tosafot disagrees. Says Tosafot in source number 45, Mikan mashma she'im shachach lehitpalel. If one forgot to pray, v'nizkar be'emsa seudav hitpalel, and you remembered in the middle of the meal to pray, ein tzarich bracha afilu lechatchila. He does not need to do a new bracha, even lechatchila. And that which Rav Yom Tov brought, where he says that position, Eina Ra'aya, that is not a proof. The Davka Gabe Bikat Hamazon Amrin Hachi, because we say that only regarding Bikat Hamazon, which cuts the meal. The Have Hefsek Vegamar Suda, because that concludes a absolute disruption, and that concludes the meal. Aval Tefillah, but regarding prayer, even though he can't eat and pray at the same time, we don't consider that an ultimate hefsek. He can still go back and continue. So who are we going to hold like? Are we going to hold like Rav Yom Tov, or are we going to hold like Tosfot? Rav Moshe Feinstein raises the following question against the opinion of Tosfot, and he says, Tefillah requires complete concentration. And one who is praying should certainly not be thinking about his meal. Why then does this not constitute a hefsek? It should be, you know what, I'm so engaged, just as Mark's talking about mindfulness during the meal, I should have mindfulness during mincha, and it should be that Rav Yom Tov's position is the way to go, and Tosfot is wrong. Rav Moshe Feinstein explains that a hefsek in this context is determined by one's intent for whether he plans to continue eating later or not, which is, no. What is my plan? Which is, what's happening at the Su'udah? When I say, okay, let's do Bikal Hamazon, everybody, what am I saying? The meal's over. When I say, hold your horses, give me 5 minutes, I've got to say mincha, I forgot to do it. What's my mindset? I've got to say mincha, but I'm coming back. I need to come back to this meal. And that's a distinction. And so, therefore, the Igrot Moshe, Rav Moshe Feinstein, holds like Tosfot and not like the Torah, and says that since your mindset was to return, you don't need to you wash your hands and say Birkat Hamazon again. How does the Shulchan Aruch rule? He rules also according with the Tosfot. It's interesting that normally we would expect the Shulchan Aruch first, because that's 500 years ago. Igrot Moshe was in the 1950s. It's a little strange that it's doing it this way. But I think the reason why they brought the Igrot Moshe because he explains the position very nicely. So there in source number 6. In source number 47, halacha 6, it says, Misha nizkar betoch ha'seudah shelo hitpalel va'amad v'hitpalel. Someone who forgot to pray, they immediately get up and pray in the middle of the meal. Afilu im ein shahot ligmor seudato lehitpalel shechayav lahafsik v'efshar lo le'echol ad sheyitpalel im kol zeh lo haveh hefsek. A person who remembered in the middle of the meal that he had not prayed and got up to pray, Even if there is not sufficient time to complete the meal and then pray, he must interrupt the meal, and he cannot eat before he prays. Even so, it's not considered an interruption. Adam sheyishan betoch seudato, someone who falls asleep during the meal.
Done that.
Shenat arai lo have hesek. We don't consider a snooze. Okay, we don't consider that sleeping, and also he can go back. The Mishnah Berurah, turn over on page 50, notes that if one leaves the house and goes to synagogue to pray, then the halacha is subject to the machloket between the Shulchan Aruch and Ramah that we saw earlier, because there you're not saying mincha in your house. There you're getting up and leaving your spot. According to the Ramah, one need not recite another bracha rishona even when leaving the house, while according to the Shulchan Aruch, one who leaves in the middle must recite another bracha rishona when he returns. Now it's important, and we talked about this last time. We normally say that for Sfaradim, we hold always like the Shulchan Aruch. However, we learned last time that even Chacham Ovadia says, in this case, we do not hold like that, and the reason was because it was considered a safek bracha, and when there's a doubtful bracha, Chacham Ovadia says don't make it. So it's one of those rare occasions. When does Chacham Ovadia disagree with Shulchan Aruch? Never, except when it's safek brachot. When it's a safek bracha, he would always say no. Okay, now if you look. Yeah, go on.
Question before we move on.
Mhm.
So the scenario we've been discussing specifically is if you forgot to do tefillah and you go away to do it.
Mhm.
Now, what if you already did mincha and you are now in your office enjoying lunch or
Mhm.
whatever, and then or an early dinner or whatever, and then you get a call, but you're still in the building. You get a call. They've got 9 for minyan. You already did mincha, but they need you for minyan. What does that mean about your meal?
So just for everyone online here, what the question was, you've already prayed mincha. That's not the issue. You've been called away from your meal to make minyan. So there you got 2 issues. Number one, even though you've prayed, you're leaving your space. So that's going to go back to this machloket here between Shulchan Aruch and Ramah. I left, so I'd ask the question: are there people there in the table? Am I eating by myself or not? If I'm with other people, nothing to worry about. I'll go and I'll come back. If it's just me, I don't know. I can do a quick Birkat Hamazon and make it to minyan. So that'd be the way I would resolve it. Just if you're really stuck and you really have no minutes, I still say I could squeeze a Birkat Hamazon in there. What I love about this book Tzorba is we've now finished 3 sessions. And you're like, wow, Rabbi, that went really fast, because Mark sometimes tells me I go too quickly, which I do. I agree. You can now review. It's got a beautiful summary. Everything here breaks it down. Everything that we've now learned in the last 3 sessions, we've finished it. You can see, you can go through everything. I always say, here's a rule of thumb. If you're learning complicated halakha and you want to make sure you understand it, read the summaries. Okay, and you can read the summary at the end of each unit after 2 or 3 sessions, or you can read the summary after each week. I want to see what's going on here, because it just breaks it down really easily, and I just think it's a beautiful summary of what we've learned so far. Okay, so that is the end of tonight's session. Next week we will begin the laws of Mayim Acharonim, of washing our hands after a meal. Okay, so